At the final hearing, my stepson gave me 10 seconds to sign away everything. I signed just as the clerk entered with the sealed envelope my husband had ordered delivered afterward. The lilies from Daniel's memorial service had not even begun to wilt when his sons came for my home. It was the last Monday of January, 4 days after we buried him. Snow pressed against the tall windows of the study in our Cherry Creek house, turning Denver into a silent white city. I sat behind Daniel's walnut desk, wrapped in the gray cardigan he always said made my eyes look blue. His reading glasses were still beside the blotter. Everything in the room insisted he would return any minute. Blake and Nolan Hale stood opposite me. Blake, the older one, was 46 and built his entire personality around never appearing surprised. He wore a navy suit, a silver tie, and the expression of a man presenting quarterly results to people he considered slow. Daniel had once possessed the same commanding posture, but where Daniel's confidence made rooms feel safe, Blake's made them feel smaller. Nolan, 42, hovered half a step behind his brother. He had softer features, restless hands, and a talent for saying cruel things in a voice that sounded almost kind. He kept glancing at the family photographs on the shelves as though checking which ones he might soon remove. "Margaret," Blake began, "we need to handle the practical side before emotions make everything more difficult." Before emotions made everything more difficult. I had spent 4 months sleeping in hospital chairs, learning medication schedules, arguing with insurance representatives, and holding Daniel's hand while his body failed him. Blake had visited twice. Nolan had arrived once, stayed 27 minutes, then left because the hospital parking garage was a nightmare. Yet now they were worried about my emotions. "What practical side?" I asked. Blake placed a black leather folder on the desk. "The estate, Dad's properties, Hale Restoration Group, the accounts connected to the company." Nolan pulled out the chair nearest him but did not sit. "We know this is painful. It's painful for all of us." I looked at him. "Is it?" His eyes dropped. Blake opened the folder. "Dad's will is straightforward. The Cherry Creek residence transfers jointly to Nolan and me. The Aspen Lodge also transfers jointly. His ownership interest in Hale Restoration Group is divided equally between us." The words sounded rehearsed. Our home was valued at around $1 million. Daniel and I had spent 26 years inside it. We had hosted 4th of July dinners on the back terrace, watched blizzards from the kitchen, and danced barefoot in the living room every New Year's Eve, even when neither of us could stay awake until midnight. The lodge outside Aspen was worth close to $900,000. Daniel had proposed to me there during a spring storm, kneeling beside a fireplace because the hiking trail he planned to use had disappeared beneath 3 feet of snow. The company was the work of his life. "And what did Daniel leave me?" I asked. Nolan finally sat down. "There's an insurance policy." "How much?" $175,000. For a moment I heard only the radiator clicking behind me. I was 62. I had left my position as an art teacher after Daniel's first heart surgery because he needed help managing the house, his travel, his clients, and the endless dinners that kept his business relationships alive. I had not resented it. We had made that choice together. He had promised again and again that I would never have to fear being old and alone without security. $175,000, I repeated. Blake's jaw tightened. It's a meaningful amount. For starting an entirely new life? Nolan leaned forward. Dad believed the family assets should remain with his blood descendants. You understand how traditional he was. Blood descendants. For 26 years, I had remembered Blake's birthday when Daniel forgot. I had driven Nolan to rehab after his first drunk driving arrest and told no one because he begged me not to destroy his father's faith in him. I had planned graduations, holidays, weddings, and emergency flights. At Daniel's memorial, both men had called me Mom in front of the guests. Now blood was the only thing that counted. Blake turned a page. We're willing to let you remain in the house for 21 days while you arrange somewhere else to live. I stared at him. You're giving me 3 weeks? We're trying to be reasonable." The sentence was so absurd that I almost laughed. Then Nolan removed a second packet from the folder. He did it carefully, avoiding my eyes. "There is another issue," he said. Blake took over. Dad's final treatments were not fully covered. Experimental infusions, private nursing, several emergency procedures. The outstanding balance is approximately $160,000. I gripped the arms of Daniel's chair. "The estate can pay that." "Not according to the current structure," Blake said. "Those bills are connected to medical decisions made by the spouse. Since you authorize several treatments, the providers may pursue you directly." "May?" "Will," Nolan corrected softly. "Most likely." So the insurance money they presented as generosity would almost disappear before I found a place to live. $15,000. That was what they were offering me after 26 years. I looked from one son to the other. Did Daniel know this was how the will would affect me? Blake did not blink. He signed it. "That isn't what I asked." We all have to accept what he decided. Outside the window, snow slid from one branch and struck the ground with a dull thump. Blake pushed the papers toward me. "Our attorney would like the preliminary acknowledgement signed by Friday. The faster this is completed, the easier it will be for everyone." "For everyone," I said. Nolan rose and came around the desk. He placed one hand on my shoulder, but I moved away before he could squeeze it. "We don't want conflict," he murmured. "Please don't turn this into something ugly." They had arrived 4 days after their father's funeral, taken my home, my future, and nearly all my money, and warned me not to make it ugly. "I need time," I said. Blake closed the folder. "You have until Friday." They left together. Through the study window, I watched them cross the snowy driveway. Before getting into Blake's Range Rover, they stopped near the gate. Nolan said something. Blake laughed. Then they shook hands. They were celebrating. I remained in Daniel's chair until the light faded and the windows became mirrors. My reflection floated over the dark garden, a tired woman with uncombed hair and a face that had aged 10 years in 4 months. When I finally stood, my knee struck the lower drawer of the desk. It slid open an inch. Inside were old receipts, fountain pen cartridges, 2 cufflink boxes, and a small red velvet pouch I had never seen before. I opened it. A brass key fell into my palm. It was narrow, old-fashioned, and marked with the number 814. Beneath it lay a folded strip of paper in Daniel's handwriting. "Maggie, when they rush you, let them." That was all. I read the sentence again. Daniel had called me Maggie only in private. Not Margaret, not sweetheart Maggie. My grief shifted. It did not disappear, but something sharp moved beneath it. Blake and Nolan thought I was trapped. Daniel's note suggested they were exactly where he wanted them. The next morning, I met with Rebecca Shaw, the attorney who had handled Daniel's personal affairs for almost 18 years. Her office occupied the 17th floor of a glass building downtown. The mountains were hidden behind clouds, and the streets below looked like thin gray lines carved through snow. Rebecca usually radiated the calm confidence of someone who could make any problem smaller by organizing it into folders. That morning, she removed her glasses twice before we finished exchanging greetings. "Margaret," she said, "I'm going to be direct. Do not sign anything Blake gives you." "I thought you represented Daniel." "I did. That's why none of this feels right." She had reviewed the copy of the will the brothers delivered. According to her, the document was valid on its face, but the timing was suspicious. It had been signed nearly 3 years earlier, before Daniel's health declined and before he sold one of his commercial properties. "He spoke to me repeatedly about protecting you," Rebecca said. "He never described a plan that left you with 3 weeks in your own home. Can we challenge it?" "Yes." "How long?" She hesitated. "A year, possibly 2, longer if the sons appeal. And during that time, we could ask the court for temporary support from the estate." "Could. Nothing in litigation is guaranteed." I told her about the medical debt. Rebecca's expression hardened. Have you seen invoices? No. Collection notices? No. An itemized statement from the hospital? No, only their summary. She sat back. Then we do not accept the number as true. I reached into my purse and touched the brass key, but did not show it to her. Daniel's note had been very specific. When they rush you, let them. I still did not know whether he meant I should surrender, delay, pretend, or simply observe. What happens if I give them what they want? I asked. Rebecca stared at me. You cannot be considering that. What happens? You would waive your right to contest the will. You would release claims against the house, lodge, business interest, investments, and most joint property. In exchange, we could demand that the estate assume every medical obligation and indemnify you from future claims. So I could walk away with the insurance money intact. You would walk away from millions. Millions that may take years to reach. She stood and crossed to the window. Grief can make surrender feel like peace. It isn't the same thing. I know. Do you? I did not answer. My phone vibrated. Blake had sent a message. Mother, Nolan and I appreciate your maturity. Our counsel can prepare the transfer documents immediately. We believe Thursday afternoon would be ideal. Mother. He had never called me that unless someone else was listening or he needed something. Another message arrived, this one from Nolan. We can have movers help. No reason for this to become stressful. I showed Rebecca. They're afraid, she said. Of me? Of time. People who are certain of their legal position rarely demand signatures within days of a funeral. I thought of the key. Draft the release, I said. Rebecca turned. Margaret. Make it look complete. Require them to accept every debt tied to whatever property they receive. Require a full release of me. No future claims. No hidden liabilities. You're asking me to help you surrender. I'm asking you to write papers so carefully that no one can later pretend they misunderstood them. Her eyes narrowed. She knew me well enough to recognize when I was withholding something. What did Daniel leave you? The question landed so precisely that I almost smiled. I don't know yet. Rebecca returned to her chair. Then do not sign until you do. I won't. That was not entirely a lie. After leaving her office, I drove to Mountain Crest Credit Union. I had found the bank's name by searching Daniel's wallet the night before. Behind his library card was a small receipt marked Box 814, renewed in September. The bank manager, a woman named Celeste Ramirez, remembered him. Mr. Hale visited 3 or 4 times this year, she said as she guided me toward the vault. He was always polite, very private. When did he open the box? About 9 months ago. That was when Daniel first began complaining about fatigue. It was also when Blake and Nolan suddenly started calling every Sunday after years of sporadic contact. Celeste stopped before a wall of metal doors. My key and the bank's key turned together. Box 814 was longer than my arm and surprisingly heavy. In the private viewing room, I lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was a photograph of Daniel and me at a Labor Day picnic 12 years earlier. I was laughing with mustard on my thumb. Daniel was looking at me instead of the camera. Beneath the photograph were 6 labeled folders, a flash drive, a sealed envelope, and a handwritten instruction. Read in order. Do not call the boys. Call Bennett after folder 6. Folder 1 contained bank statements for an entity called Blue Mesa Holdings. The most recent balance was $5.2 million. A yellow note in Daniel's handwriting was attached to the first page. Our real reserve. Built over 20 years. They never knew because they never asked about anything unless they wanted it. I sat down. Daniel had never hidden purchases from me. We discussed budgets, taxes, repairs, and travel. But he had managed the business investments, and I had trusted him when he said our future was secure. I had imagined that meant the house, retirement accounts, and insurance, not $5 million in an unknown company. Folder 2 contained mortgage documents. The Cherry Creek house had a loan against it for $1.35 million. The Aspen Lodge carried another loan for $950,000. Both loans had been taken within the previous 7 months, even though we had owned the properties free and clear. The money had been transferred into Blue Mesa Holdings. I read every page twice. The properties Blake and Nolan believed were prizes carried more debt than their combined market value. Folder 3 held private investigator reports. The first report focused on Blake. For years, he had told us his corporate law practice was expanding. In reality, he had lost 2 major clients after mishandling trust funds. He owed more than $310,000 to casinos, private lenders, and 3 former clients. Photographs showed him entering a high-limit gaming room in Blackhawk on 6 different weekends. One image captured him handing an envelope to a man identified as a bookmaker. The report also documented forged signatures, Daniel's signatures. Blake had used them to guarantee 2 loans through a shell company called Summit Ridge Consulting. The proceeds had gone directly toward gambling losses. I pressed one hand to my mouth. Folder 4 was Nolan. His renewable infrastructure consultancy barely existed. He had persuaded 4 elderly investors to fund a development project in western Colorado, then diverted at least $420,000 into personal accounts. He used some of it for a leased Porsche, a country club membership, and renovations to the house he shared with his wife, Paige. One recorded conversation had been transcribed. Nolan: "Once Dad's gone, I can make everyone whole." Unknown speaker: "What if the wife controls the estate?" Nolan: "She won't. Blake has the old man handled." The old man: "Their father was dying, and Nolan had reduced him to an obstacle with a heartbeat." Folder 5 contained medical records from an independent neurologist and 2 witnesses who had evaluated Daniel 6 weeks before his death. He had been physically weak but mentally competent, fully oriented, capable of understanding complex financial and legal decisions. Attached was a memorandum from Daniel. "They are preparing to claim I was confused. I am not confused. I am disappointed. I had to stop reading." For 4 months, I had protected Daniel from the harshest facts of his illness. I had smiled when he was frightened, lied when I said I wasn't tired, and cried only in the shower so he would not hear me. All that time, he had been protecting me from something else. Folder 6 contained a will dated 11 weeks before his death. It revoked every prior version. It left all assets, accounts, company interests, insurance proceeds, and personal property to me. Blake and Nolan were not directly disinherited. Instead, the will gave me sole discretion to decide what, if anything, they received. One clause was underlined: "I entrust my beloved wife, Margaret Hale, with the final judgment regarding my sons. She has shown them more mercy than they deserved, and more loyalty than they returned. Whatever she decides shall reflect my wishes." My hands began to shake. The sealed envelope was addressed to Maggie. I opened it. "My dearest Maggie, if you are reading this, then Blake and Nolan moved quickly, exactly as I feared. I am sorry for every hour you will spend believing I abandoned you. I could not tell you the plan because I needed your reaction to be real. The boys have spent years mistaking kindness for blindness. If they believed you knew, they might have destroyed evidence, pressured you, or worse. They found an older will through someone connected to my former legal files. They believe it is the final document. It is not. I mortgaged the house and lodge because those are the assets they have always wanted. The money belongs to you through Blue Mesa. If they demand the properties, you may give them exactly what they demand, including every obligation attached to them. The company they think they are inheriting also carries liabilities they created. Blake used forged guarantees. Nolan moved investor money through an affiliated account. Bennett has the records. I did not do this to punish them for being imperfect. I did it because they were willing to leave you homeless, take what we built, and blame you for the bills from my deathbed. Do not save them from consequences simply because I could not stop loving them. Call Omar Bennett. Trust Rebecca only after Bennett explains why I left her firm. Live somewhere warm. Pain again. Buy the red coat you always put back on the rack. I loved you every day, including the days I was too frightened to say how frightened I was. Daniel. For several minutes, I could not see the page. Then I noticed one final item beneath the letter, a small digital recorder. A label read, Dinner, November 26th. Thanksgiving. I pressed play. Daniel's voice came first, weak but unmistakably clear. "You're asking me to transfer the company before I die," Blake answered. "We're asking you to protect continuity." Nolan said, "Margaret doesn't understand operations. If you leave her control, she could ruin everything." Daniel coughed. "And if I refuse?" There was a pause. Then Blake said, "You should think about who will decide whether your private nurse remains affordable." The recording ended. I sat absolutely still. They had threatened a dying man with the loss of his care. The grief inside me became something else, not rage. Rage burns too quickly. This was colder. This could wait. Omar Bennett answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Hale," he said before I introduced myself. "Daniel told me you would call only after you knew everything." Omar Bennett worked from a modest brick building near Civic Center Park. He was 68, silver-haired, and more interested in facts than performance. Once I was seated, he said, "Your husband was afraid he would die before he could repair the damage his sons created. Why didn't you contact me after his death?" His instructions prohibited it until you opened the box, or until 30 days passed. He believed Blake was monitoring calls and mail connected to the estate. He wanted the brothers to reveal their intentions before we appeared. I handed him Daniel's letter. He read it without expression, then placed it carefully beside the file on his desk. "What happened with Rebecca's firm?" I asked. Daniel discovered that confidential details from an estate planning meeting reached Blake within 48 hours. We traced the leak to a paralegal who was dating one of Blake's former associates. We found no evidence Rebecca knew, but Daniel would not risk another disclosure. He moved the final will here and asked that her firm remain unaware. So Rebecca may be innocent. Most likely. Most likely isn't certainty. No, it isn't. Omar opened a binder and showed me certified copies of the final will, the deeds, the loans, the Blue Mesa operating agreement, and the evidence against both brothers. He also explained the insurance policies. Blake and Nolan knew about one policy worth $175,000. They did not know about a second for $625,000. Between the policies and Blue Mesa, I controlled nearly $6 million before accounting for investments in the company. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the weight of Daniel's recorder in my purse. "What exactly are my options?" I asked. "First, you can probate the final will, retain everything, and refer the financial crimes to prosecutors." "And they go to prison." "That decision belongs to the state, but the evidence is serious." "Second, you can offer a civil resolution. They accept specific assets with specific liabilities, waive claims, repay certain victims, and agree to no contact. In exchange, you delay or limit referral of some evidence, provided the arrangement is lawful and approved. Can I give them the house and lodge? You can offer them. They can decline. If they accept, they must assume the mortgages or surrender the properties. Their credit makes refinancing unlikely. The company interest they want is also burdened by obligations linked to their own conduct. Daniel had not built a trap that snapped shut automatically. He had built a choice. The brothers could walk away with nothing and face investigation, or accept the symbols of wealth they coveted and discover those symbols were hollow. Omar watched me absorb this. "Daniel did not leave instructions about mercy," he said. "He left that to you. I'm not feeling merciful. You do not have to decide today." My phone rang. Nolan. I let it stop. Then Blake called. Then Paige, Nolan's wife. Then an unknown number. Omar glanced at the screen. "They may know you visited the bank." "How?" "Blake has friends in financial institutions, or they followed you." A message appeared from Paige. "Dinner tonight at 7. Please come. The boys are worried strangers are confusing you. We need one calm family conversation." Omar read it. "Do not go alone," he said. "I need them to believe I'm still confused." That can be useful. It can also be dangerous. I thought of Blake threatening Daniel's nurse. I'll take precautions. That evening, I drove to Nolan and Paige's house in Greenwood Village with my phone recording in my handbag and a retired police investigator hired by Omar parked 2 houses away. Their house displayed the success Nolan no longer possessed: a heated driveway, glass doors, 2 luxury cars, and a chandelier bright enough to see from the street. Paige embraced me in the entryway. Blake waited beside the fireplace with his wife, Veronica, who had not been mentioned in the invitation. "We are all on your side," Veronica said. "What side is that?" "The family's side." During dinner, Nolan talked too loudly about Daniel's generosity. Paige kept refilling my glass. Blake watched every movement I made. Halfway through the meal, he placed a folder beside my plate. "Rebecca sent a draft," he said. "Our council made a few improvements." "Improvements for whom?" "For everyone." I opened the folder. The first page waived my right to challenge any version of the will. The second transferred the properties and company interest. The third required me to accept responsibility for all medical bills and any tax deficiency later discovered. They had added liabilities Rebecca had specifically excluded. "I thought the estate was paying the medical debt," I said. Nolan looked at Blake. Blake answered, "That was discussed, not promised. You told me it would be included. We said we would try." The lie was effortless. I turned another page. "This clause says I must vacate the house within 10 days. Paige gave a sympathetic smile. "We found a buyer who wants a quick closing." A buyer? They were not even waiting to own the house before trying to sell it. Veronica lifted her wine glass. "A clean transition may help everyone heal." I looked around the table. 4 people wearing expensive clothes, eating from imported plates, explaining that removing a widow from her home 10 days after a funeral would be healing. "I found something in Daniel's study," I said. Blake's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "What?" Nolan asked too quickly. "A key." No one moved. "Probably an old cabinet key," Paige said. "It opened a safe deposit box." The change in the room was immediate. Veronica's smile disappeared. Nolan's face lost color. Blake set down his fork with deliberate care. "What was inside?" he asked. "Papers, statements, a letter." "What kind of statements?" I didn't understand them. Relief flickered across Nolan's face before he hit it. Blake leaned closer. "Legal and financial documents are easy to misread. You should bring everything to me. To you, I'm an attorney. You're also a beneficiary." His expression tightened. "I am your son," he said. "Stepson," Veronica corrected without thinking. The word hung between us. Nolan shot his wife a furious look. She lowered her eyes. I closed the folder. Perhaps I should ask the hospital for the original bills before I sign. "You don't need to involve the hospital," Nolan said. "Why not?" "Because we already negotiated the balance." "With whom?" He opened his mouth, then looked at Blake. Blake's patience cracked. "Margaret, what exactly are you trying to do?" "I'm trying to understand why the numbers keep changing." "They aren't changing." The medical debt was $160,000. Rebecca found no invoice. "Tonight you want me to accept unknown future bills. You told me I had 21 days in the house. This says 10. You said Daniel wanted the assets kept in the family, yet Paige says you already have a buyer." Paige whispered, "Nolan." He ignored her. Blake placed both palms on the table. "You are grieving. You are allowing suspicion to distort simple facts. And you are rushing me. Because delay damages value." "Whose value?" Silence. Then Nolan did something I had never seen him do. He slammed his fist against the table. The wine glasses jumped. Paige gasped. "You always do this," he said. "You make everything about you. Dad spent his whole life building something for us, and now you want to create a courtroom circus because you can't accept that you were his second wife." I stared at him. He'd been waiting 26 years to say that. Blake spoke through clenched teeth. "Nolan, stop." "No, she needs to hear it. She walked into a life Dad already built. She lived in his house, spent his money, played hostess. Now she thinks she deserves the Hale name more than his actual sons?" I stood. Paige reached for me. "Margaret, he's emotional." "No," I said. "He's honest." I picked up my purse. Blake blocked the doorway. It happened so smoothly that at first I thought he was simply standing to speak. Then I realized the dining room exit was behind him and he had no intention of moving. "Sit down," he said. The room became silent. "Move," I said. "We need those documents. They belong to me. They concern our father. They concern my husband." His polished expression vanished. He reached toward my purse. I stepped back and showed him the recording running on my phone. "Everything since I arrived is saved," I said. "Someone outside expects me in 2 minutes." Blake froze. Nolan whispered a curse. I walked around Blake. This time, he moved. At the front door, Paige caught up with me. "Margaret," she said quietly, "please don't destroy us." I turned. "Did you know they threatened Daniel's nursing care?" Her face answered before her mouth did. That hurt more than I expected. "You knew," I said. "He was never actually going to lose the nurse." "That is what you tell yourself?" Tears filled her eyes. Behind her, Nolan shouted her name. I left. At 2:13 that morning, the security alarm in Daniel's study woke me. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed. A hooded figure was climbing through the side window. For a second, my body forgot how to move. Then the figure turned toward the desk and the camera caught his face. Nolan. He pulled open drawers, swept papers onto the floor, and tried every cabinet. He moved with frantic speed. When he reached the shelf holding Daniel's ashes, his elbow struck the urn. It tipped. He caught it against his chest before it fell. For one strange moment, he stood in the dark holding his father's ashes. Then he set the urn down and continued searching. The police arrived within minutes and caught him trying to leave through the kitchen. "Margaret," he shouted, twisting toward me. "Tell them this is my father's house." "It was," I said. His eyes went wide. Blake arrived before the patrol cars left. "Do not press charges," he demanded. "This is still our family home." He climbed through a window and searched Daniel's office. "You are making a terrible mistake." I looked at Nolan in the police car. "My mistake was believing you would become better men if I loved you hard enough." "This will get ugly," Blake said. "It already is." The next morning I called Rebecca and told her everything. By noon she was in Omar's office reviewing the real will. She read Daniel's memorandum about the leak twice. "I did not know," she said. "I believe you," Omar replied. But Daniel could not take the chance. Rebecca looked at me. "What do you want me to do?" "Finish the release." Her eyebrows rose. I explained the offer I intended to make. When I finished, Rebecca slowly removed her glasses. "Margaret," she said, "that is either the most reckless decision I have ever heard or the most precise. Can you draft it?" "Yes." "Then draft it." We scheduled the formal estate hearing for the following Thursday. Blake believed it would be the day I surrendered. He was right. He simply did not understand what I was surrendering to him. The hearing took place on a cold Thursday morning in a private probate conference room at the Denver City and County Building. Blake arrived first with Veronica and 2 attorneys. Nolan came through a separate entrance because the temporary protection order prohibited him from approaching my house. Paige walked behind him, pale and silent. Rebecca sat on my left. Omar sat on my right. A court clerk arranged documents at the end of the long table. Blake looked at the empty chair across from him. "Is someone else joining us?" Omar checked his watch. "Later." Blake turned to me. Margaret, this can still be simple. Sign the original transfer, dismiss the complaint against Nolan, and we can put this unfortunate week behind us." "Which original transfer?" I asked. "The one giving me 21 days to leave, or the improved one giving me 10? His attorney touched his arm, warning him not to answer. The clerk began by confirming identities and explaining that every signature would be recorded. Then Rebecca placed the waiver in front of me. It was the document Blake had demanded: my voluntary release of claims to the Cherry Creek house, the Aspen Lodge, and a designated portion of Hale Restoration Group. Blake leaned across the table. "You have 10 seconds to sign before we drag your name through every court in Colorado," he whispered. "We will tell everyone you manipulated Dad while he was medicated. We will freeze the accounts. We will make sure you spend every dollar defending yourself." I picked up the pen. The clerk opened the door and carried in a sealed envelope. Blake stopped smiling. Omar stood. "Before Mrs. Hale completes the transfer, the court must acknowledge the final will of Daniel Joseph Hale, executed November 9th, witnessed by 2 independent physicians and deposited with Bennett Legal Group." One of Blake's attorneys shot to his feet. "We object. This is the first we have heard of any superseding instrument." "That is because your client presented an outdated will as final," Omar said. The clerk removed the certified document and handed copies around the table. I watched Blake read. The confidence left his face line by line. Nolan reached the clause giving me sole discretion over their inheritance. His hands began to tremble. "This can't be valid," he said. "It has already been authenticated," Rebecca replied. "Daniel's competency was independently evaluated. The execution was recorded. There are no grounds to claim confusion." Blake looked at me. "Then why are you signing a waiver?" "Because I decided to honor your request." I signed. For one glorious second, relief returned to his face. Then Omar placed 2 transfer packets before the brothers. "The properties are yours," he said, "along with all recorded mortgages, tax obligations, maintenance arrears, and contractual liabilities." Blake flipped to the debt schedule. His lips parted. Nolan read over his shoulder. $2.3 million? "The combined current balance," Omar said, "plus fees." "The properties aren't worth that much," Paige whispered. "No," I said, "they aren't." Blake shoved the packet away. "We refuse." "You may," Omar said. "In that case, you receive nothing under the final will." "Fine. And Mrs. Hale will authorize immediate delivery of the investigative files to the district attorney, the state securities commissioner, the bar association, and the 4 investors whose funds Nolan diverted." Nolan's chair scraped backward. "What files?" Omar opened his briefcase. He placed copies of forged guarantees, wire transfers, casino markers, emails, and transcripts across the table. Then he set down the recorder from Thanksgiving. Daniel's voice filled the room. "You should think about who will decide whether your private nurse remains affordable." When the recording ended, no one moved. Veronica covered her mouth. Paige stared at Nolan as though she had never seen him before. Blake turned on his attorney. "This was a private family conversation. It was recorded by the owner of the home," Omar said. "Colorado law permits a participant to record." Nolan looked at me. "What do you want?" "The same thing Daniel wanted, a choice." I explained the terms. They could accept the transferred assets and liabilities, waive every claim against me, cooperate in repayment plans for the people they harmed, surrender any forged corporate instruments, and communicate with me only through counsel. In exchange, I would not personally advocate for the harshest available criminal charges, though I would not lie to investigators or obstruct any case. Or they could walk away. Blake read the agreement for nearly 20 minutes. "This ruins us," he said. "You were already ruined," I replied. "You were waiting for Daniel's death to hide it." Nolan's voice cracked. "He was our father." "Yes." "How could he do this?" I felt my anger rise, but beneath it was a sadness so deep it almost softened my voice. He did not forge his own signature. He did not take money from retirees. He did not threaten his nurse. He did not break into my house. Daniel did not create the consequences. He stopped protecting you from them. Paige began crying. Veronica turned to Blake. Tell me the gambling records are false. He said nothing. She removed her wedding ring and placed it beside his papers. That was the moment Blake finally broke. Not when he learned he had lost the estate. Not when he heard his father's recording. When his wife's ring touched the table, his face collapsed. He looked suddenly younger, like the angry 20-year-old I had once picked up from a police station after Daniel refused to answer the phone. "Margaret," he whispered, "please." For 26 years, that word would have changed me. It did not change the documents. "You have until noon," Omar said. At 11:53, Nolan signed. At 11:58, Blake signed. The clerk notarized both agreements. As they rose to leave, Nolan paused beside me. "Did Dad hate us?" "No," I said. "That was the tragedy. He loved you until the end." Blake stood at the doorway. "This isn't over." I looked at the sealed final will, Daniel's letter, and the signatures accepting the exact inheritance they had demanded. "Yes," I said, "it is." The legal aftermath lasted months. Neither brother could refinance the properties, and both entered foreclosure. Blue Mesa later repurchased them from the lenders. Blake's law license was suspended. He pleaded guilty to financial misconduct, entered gambling treatment, and received strict probation with restitution. Nolan pleaded guilty to securities fraud, served 11 months in county custody, and lost his marriage. I did not celebrate. I still remembered the boys they had once been. But Daniel had stopped absorbing the cost of their choices. So did I. 5 months after the hearing, I sold the Denver house. I kept the photograph from the safe deposit box, Daniel's reading glasses, the Thanksgiving recorder, and 1 box of letters. Everything else became furniture, paperwork, or money. I moved to Santa Fe into an adobe house with blue doors, a courtyard full of lavender, and a small studio facing the mountains. On my first morning there, I bought a red coat even though it was June and far too warm to wear it. Then I began painting again. At first, I painted badly. My hands were stiff and every canvas looked like an apology. But I kept going. By autumn, I was volunteering at a legal clinic for older people facing financial manipulation by relatives. One woman arrived with a grocery bag of notices after her nephew borrowed against her home. She kept saying, "He loves me. He just gets desperate." We found her an attorney and saved the house. A year after Daniel's death, I used part of the insurance money to establish the Daniel Hale Project for Family Financial Safety. We funded legal consultations, fraud education, emergency housing, and art workshops for people rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. Daniel had not been perfect. He hid too much and trusted his plan more than my strength, but his last act gave me the freedom to discover that strength. On the first anniversary of the hearing, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was the old brass key marked 814. I had surrendered it to the bank when the box was closed. Beneath it was a note from Nolan. "I don't expect forgiveness. Dad was right about what I became. I'm trying to become someone else." I read it twice. Then I placed the key in the red velvet pouch and locked it in my desk. I did not call him. Forgiveness, I had learned, does not always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means refusing to spend the rest of your life standing beside it. Now I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have given Blake and Nolan the inheritance they demanded, turned everything over to prosecutors, or chosen another path entirely? Tell me in the comments and share whether you have ever seen greed change a family after someone died. 2 more stories are waiting on the final screen. Both begin with families who believed a quiet woman would never fight back. Thank you for staying with me until the end.